Hello and welcome to Inside the Avatar Studio. Inside the Avatar Studio brings together innovative leaders from the virtual technology frontier to discuss perceptions, perspectives, and predictions of what being virtual means in today's society. With me today is Will Burns, who is also known as Aeonix Aeon in Second Life. Will is an academic author, technology researcher, and trend forecaster and virtual environment specialist with over 15 years in the industry, ranging from virtual environments to social media interactions. Will is also a contributor to the Metaverse Roadmap. Hopefully I'm going to pronounce this correctly, Solipsis Decentralized Metaverse, and is currently an active member of the IEEE Virtual World Standards Workgroup. Will, I'd like to welcome you to Inside the Avatar Studio.
Hey, it's great to be here. It's pronounced Solipsis, by the way. No worries.
Solipsis? Okay.
Solipsis. It's okay.
I am terrible with names. I fully and usually I try to warn people of that up in advance.
No worries.
I've got a question that I'm dying to ask you right off the top here. Who is the cleaning lady in Second Life?
There's no cleaning lady in Second Life. It's just
sure?
It's a giant mess on the servers, isn't it?
I don't know. I was going through some of your blogs, and you had a very interesting post on there from last year where you were talking about the 5 different lessons that everybody needs to learn, and number 1 on the list is knowing who the cleaning lady is.
Yeah. I never bothered to check. It wasn't important to me. I was under the impression that there was no cleaning lady.
I know somebody's cleaning up the prims around here. I'm not quite sure who it is.
I always thought it was automated, wasn't it?
Well, supposedly.
Unless you want to get to know the sandbox codes.
Well, there we go. There we go. I noticed from talking to a number of people and reading through some of your blog posts and what have you. I mean, obviously you've got fairly extensive experience with the intellectual property arena and virtual worlds, and specifically with regards to Mars and M&M, Bandai and Namco. I'm just wondering if you could quickly recap some of your, like, if there's a synopsis to do this. Just sort of recap some of what you found with inside that arena over the last 10 years or so that you've been doing this.
Well, I wouldn't say I've found much. I've found pretty much the same thing over the last 10 or 15 years. And it really hasn't changed since I began thinking about it years and years ago. The process is pretty convoluted. A lot of places, they do have this whole no solicitation policy. So as a consumer, you're pretty much out in the cold, unless you're a major producer or content creator. So, maybe a gaming place or whatnot. You might have your contacts in there to talk to. But if you're just a regular old consumer, you're really stuck with no options. You can send in all the paperwork you want, you can give all the ideas you want, and it just hits a brick wall. You might as well be talking into the darkness. And even if you did get the paperwork, and they go, yeah, we'll take a look at it and we'll get back to you. If they got back to you, it's usually they really don't know what to do with it. And if 9 times out of 10 they don't get back to you at all, they just kind of humor you and walk away. So the problem that I've found over the last 10 or 15 years is that really what it comes down to is that it's not a consumer atmosphere anymore. It's not really a producer atmosphere. We've kind of evolved into a prosumer kind of atmosphere. So the consumers of the content are also creators of the content. And I'm not entirely certain that these companies have any protocol to handle that. They know how to deal with consumers. They categorize them and say, okay, well, these are the people we're trying to sell stuff to. So we're trying to brand to and market to. And we have the producers on the opposite end of the spectrum, and they say, okay, these are the guys we have to work with. But when a prosumer enters the mix, somebody who consumes the content and creates it at the same time, it falls into this big nebulous gray area that no matter what you're doing, you're going to just kind of sit there in limbo. And recently, I did that with the arcade machines to demonstrate that once again that nothing had really changed. I knew what the end result was going to be. I sent in the paperwork and it just fell into limbo. And I would send in, periodic messages and calls, and they would say, yeah, we're looking at it, but we really don't know what to do with it. And it would just keep going on like that indefinitely. So my thought was, well, just force the hand. The worst they're going to do is give me a DMCA and take it down, and that would be the end of it. But I wanted to demonstrate that when you're a prosumer, consumer and producer, you still fall under these consumer rules, which is to say that there's no solicitation, there's nothing to, there's really no recourse. You can send in all you want, and they treat you like a producer at the very least. And then they say, okay, well, we want 6 figures for a licensing agreement or whatever. But you're not a huge content creator. You're not Atari, and you're not these AAA gaming. But you're not Activision Blizzard. You don't have that kind of budget. But it's very beneficial to these companies if they start working with ways to deal with prosumers. More interactive ways, more listening and less dictating.
True, but then you've also got, on the other hand, you've got, I guess what I would consider be the Disney argument, which is, we don't want to see Donald Duck or Mickey Mouse ending up in porn flicks.
Of course not. I'm not saying that they should, nor am I saying that the content should be misused or abused. But there should be a process in order for a prosumer or consumer to create these items and get approval, and that doesn't exist at all at this point. You can go to them and you can get a no solicitation and maybe a pat on the head, and they'll say, thank you for the idea, we'll consider it, and it just gets thrown in a waste bin somewhere. Or maybe later on they'll do it themselves with a multi-million-dollar budget, and you're just kind of sitting there scratching your head. So there's no open channels there. They go off and do their own thing, and no, I don't want to see Disney characters in porn. There's enough of that on the internet anyway, whether Disney likes that or not. But that brings an interesting point. When you have no channels for this officially, in maybe a virtual environment or an open-ended environment, if you're not giving the people what they actually want, they're going to make it anyway if you give them the tools to make it, because they want familiarity. And these brands have created such familiarity that that it now overflows. It's out of their control. You go out and people want Coca-Cola, they're going to make Coca-Cola. They're going to make Budweiser. They're going to make Corona bottles. They're going to make Nike sneakers like I'm wearing now, name it something else. But clearly they want these things. And this is a goldmine. Prosumers, direct interaction with the consumer / producer of content in virtual environments and other arenas, and some sort of way to deal with this, or at least facilitate the process, is very beneficial to companies to get on board. I mean, this is a marketing venue. Marketplace for Second Life, for instance, is definitely a huge marketing blitz, and it's cheaper than buying an island. It always has been. When Dell comes in and buys up Dell Island and does this huge blitz and all this marketing and stuff for it, all they really needed was the laptops, and I said it from day one. And they could have put it on Marketplace, and all they had to do was work with the prosumers in here, the consumers that are producers of content at the same time, and it would have cost them next to nothing and had much better results. But there's no such thing as that in here.
Well, and certainly, I mean, if you look at, I guess, sort of IBM's experience with Microsoft, where Microsoft basically comes in, buys up DOS for a song, right? And next thing you know, they're owning the marketplace for operating systems, right? At what point? I guess to a certain extent, from the large corporate perspective, at what point do you have this idea of supporting culture or how do I want to put this? Supporting culture's need to be able to identify with various different brands as part of defining, I guess, a sense of self, compared to, at what point is the tipping point between somebody creating a derivative work, which is out there simply for, entertainment or amusement standpoint, versus something which represents real dollars.
No, it's a very blurred line. I don't have a very simple answer for that. I would say, from my point of view, the worst case scenario is that it's marketing, and the best case scenario is that it's marketing. So it's cheaper, it's cheap, or it's cheaper. And the worst case scenario is it's very cheap or it's very free for these companies to do this stuff. So it's something that they could get involved with, and they could be, monitoring. It would take really nothing to really monitor this stuff and say, is this giving some good feedback? When we don't use, I guess people don't use the term viral marketing anymore, but the same concept still applies, even better in a 3D environment. Whether or not it's a derivative works also count as, if it's noticeable and it's in a positive kind of manner, then that's the sort of thing that these companies or these brands or whatever should be monitoring. That's the aspect they should be monitoring. Is this positive? Is it not coming back on us in a negative kind of light? If not, then by all means, give it the creativity, because from that point on, it's just promoting you. And it's doing it for free in most cases, and probably making money at that point. It's like people paying these companies to be advertised to, which I would think would be the dream of any advertising agency.
Yeah,
people paying to be advertised to. But no, I mean, it's a reversal. It's a really mixed up, topsy-turvy reversal of thinking.
Well, it is, because I mean, as you're talking about this, one of the things that's starting to get me thinking is this idea of the difference between a brand, which is something that as a corporation you want to have some control over, versus where the brand crosses over into definition of cultural identity. Right. So I mean, the two things that I'm thinking of right off the top is this whole concept of Kleenex. Most people, if you say Kleenex, everybody knows that you're referring to, the tissue paper that you use to tissue paper that you use to blow your nose.
Paper at that point. You just say, give me a Kleenex or give me a Band-Aid, or.
But yet Kleenex is actually a brand, and it's one that Kleenex did take to court at one point to say, these other companies cannot use the name Kleenex because that's our brand. And yet in the court case, it was determined that, and I'd have to go back and get the actual thing, but I mean, they were saying, no, at a certain point, the verbiage has crossed over from being a brand, something which a company has control over, to something that defines a class of product or a substance or a culture or part of cultural identity.
Right. And a lot of these major brands have crossed that line, where it just becomes so ubiquitous that when it's missing from any atmosphere, that's when people start noticing. It's not, they don't notice that it's there. They notice when it's not there. And they start going, well, that's what I want. This is, I don't want brand XYZ. I want whatever, And when they go looking for it, and especially in virtual environments, and they don't find it, well, in Second Life, in other environments, they give you toolboxes, and when they tell you, build whatever you want, and people will build whatever they want, and it's a never-ending battle if you want to fight it. And this is the difference between, the whole remix culture and being able to control the message. And this is the same kind of lesson that you learn in social media marketing, is that the difference between point A, old school marketing and social media aspects is that there was a time where, you would have to be controlling the message. And that was standard practice. How do we control the message from point A to point B? And that would be television, radio, we control the entire channel. When you get to social media, all bets are out, all bets are off. You don't control the message anymore. You control the positive aspects and try to minimize the negative aspects. And you do so by working with these consumers or these prosumers, because that's what they are. They're creating the content, they're creating the good, the good and positive feedback and the negative feedback. And it's more managing your image more than trying to control every aspect of it. And the problem is that a lot of these companies, well, most of them, haven't really grasped the concept of crossing over to this this, you can't control the message, and you're just cutting off heads of a hydra if you try, and it's going to get worse and worse. And a classic case of this is the RIAAA and the MPAA in the United States. You know, when Napster came out, you know, they panicked. So what do? They just sue them into oblivion and dust their hands off and say, okay, you know, job well done. A couple of years later, like 8 or 9 more, you know, different peer-to-peer systems pop up, and then they go off and sue those, you know. So I'll start suing the people, and then, you know, it just gets worse and worse, and they get more, and these peer-to-peer systems get more and more powerful because you're fighting a hydra. And, you know, we get to, you know, all the way down the road, 10, 11 years down the road, and we're looking at, you know, recently Google wants to do the whole music data thing, which is all cloud storage and everything, and still to this day, these recording labels are fighting tooth and nail. Like, oh no, you have to charge, you know, ridiculous amounts of prices, and you have to do this, and you have to do DRM, and Google just said, I'm washing my hands of it. You know, we're going to launch without it and let people upload what they want, you know, from what their own collections are. You know, we'll do it our way because you clearly don't get it. And it's been 11 years, and I'm running millions and millions of dollars. You know, untold millions of dollars have been spent in lawsuits and, you know, and trying to change the laws and trying to, you know, sue people into the ground for things and trying to shut these networks down. It just keeps getting bigger. So clearly this is something we have to address, you know, whether it's piracy or whether it's remixing or whether it's just addressing a new paradigm. The bottom line is we can't control the message anymore, but we can influence it, and that's really where they need to be going. You know, how to influence it and how to work with the community that's really doing all these things.
Well, yeah, and despite the fact that, I mean, and you've obviously seen this. I mean, most people have seen this. I mean, we, in quite a number of instances, we sort of have a good idea of what is the right thing to be doing, but because of the bureaucracy and the infrastructure that we've created around what it is that we're doing, we don't necessarily do the right thing or the most beneficial thing in all cases because it would contradict the established or the status quo, which then leads us into all kinds of conflict. I think it's, as you mentioned in some of your blog postings, I mean, we've seen this with Bandai, we've seen this with Mars and M&M, where you've got the marketing department and the IP department, you know, basically the marketers and the lawyers going head to head in terms of, well, we really want to do this, but yet we can't do it because we've got these rules on the other side of the fence. Is there a single, and I realize I'm going to answer my own question after I say it, but I mean, is there a simple point of failure where this has sort of been creeping up around, or is this whole issue something, you know, larger and more systemic?
Honestly, I think it comes down to, I wouldn't say there's a single point of failure. I would say there's a failure of understanding, embracing new technologies and new paradigms. That's a major failure right there. People are more connected. You know, we're not chained to maybe a CD format anymore. You don't have to go out and put up with 20 songs on a CD and maybe, you know, 8 of them we like and the rest of them are crap. We can pick and choose. We can choose whatever we want, and we're getting these MP3 players that can hold hundreds of thousands, if not more, songs. You know, and we still got these. We still have these formats like, you know, maybe Blu-ray, where you put the, you know, you're paying good money for it. You're saying, "Oh, can we be faithful? I paid good money," and we put it in a Blu-ray player. You've paid them, you know, the couple $100 for your Blu-ray player and your widescreen TV, and, you know, you've done everything the right way, like you should. You put it in, and what do you get? You know, you get like the first 10 minutes of first 10 minutes of previews and advertisements, and you can't skip it. You know, like, why are you doing this to me? I'm trying to do this the right way, and, you know, you're constantly you're shoving advertising down my throat. You're making it as hard as humanly possible for me to tolerate this. So, you know, and they go, well, you know, DRM and everything else. You know, why won't it play? I mean, I remember a number of years ago, I got an MP3 player, and all I really wanted to do was play my music on it. And I had my CD collection, and I went through and I did everything the right way, ripped it down, and put it on my MP3 player, and it just wouldn't play. So I'm like, all right, well, I want to play. I had to go through this whole Microsoft Play for Sure thing, download the software, install it, update my firmware. I'm just jumping through hoops, and in the end, it crashed the player. It just died. And took all my music with it, and corrupted it all. And I said, this isn't worth it. So I went out and I got myself at the time. I still have it right here. I refuse to get an iPod or anything because I think the player I have now is, while it's old, it does the trick. I have like a Creative Zen Touch. They're discontinued, but I can open this thing up like a folder, drop my music on directly, and hit play. That's it. I don't need any complicated programs. I don't need to, have it sort things or sync things, or, I don't need to go through DRM hoops. I just move my music over, I'm done. And this is the type of simplicity that I think, not just consumers, but prosumers, because we're so used to getting this information and we have access to so much on a whim. It seems kind of silly to have anything else at this point. The Pandora's box is open. It seems silly to pay for the Wall Street Journal online when you can, queue up CNN.com and, and 500,000 other websites that'll feed information just as quick, if not faster. This whole paid wall kind of walled garden approach is crumbling. Just like the ways of AOL, CompuServe, and Prodigy, before the World Wide Web really became a big thing. They had these, walled gardens where you'd have to type in keywords, and they might give you limited access to, the web. They didn't really tell you that the rest of the web really existed, or that you could get everything that you're getting with their service for a hell of a lot cheaper, and you didn't have to go through them to get it. And the walls of these, walled gardens started crumbling, and people started realizing, hey, wait a minute, why am I paying for this? Why am I paying for less when the entire world is at my fingertips for free? A lot of these things people are just doing in open source, or or doing it as a service online for free. Why am I paying for this? Why am I paying for less? And that's what it boils down to. Companies are stuck in the old paradigm where they think they're controlling the message, and people just kind of shrug and walk away. And they go, well, no, you don't control the message anymore. You haven't for 10 or 15 years. You just think you do. And then when they don't get their way, they go off and start suing people and spending millions of dollars and wondering why, the media and the public opinion of that company starts, bottoming out, because opinions move fast, faster than the speed of a keystroke heard around the world. If you piss off somebody enough, they'll rally faster than you've ever, by tomorrow morning, there'll be, a petition out with hundreds of thousands of people. You can't really control that message, but you can influence it in a positive way and keep tabs on it. So, in my reasoning when I say this is that in 1998, when I was in Active Worlds, originally 1995, 6, and 1998, around those, beginning years, myself and a couple of people, we were really bored, and we said, okay, what is the future of this technology, this this virtual social environment thing? And everybody was building nightclubs back then. Gee, what a surprise, right?
Yeah.
Building nightclubs and doing these little events and parties and whatnot. We said, well, there's got to be more than this. And we started realizing, we built up a town. So we had pretty much infinite space where we needed to be. So we can do whatever we want. We started building a town. We said, okay, well, what would be in this town? Let's say people are actually hanging out here and living here and, and existing in here. What would actually be here? We started saying, well, maybe food brands and Home Depot, and maybe online shopping, or maybe a phone booth I can call out, dialpad.com. And we started hooking all this stuff up, and we walked around and said, this is the future. Brands could be in here very easily. And the classic case, which is still a running joke with myself and the rest of the people I work with, even today, on and off, is every build we have, we try to incorporate a Papa John's pizza box. We look it up, and we hook it up to their ordering site, and let people order from it. We say, here, And people go, well, they're going to get mad at you. And I say, well, if you go to their site, it says no solicitation, so there really is no way I could ask them permission. And if I did, it would fall on deaf ears. But we've had this Papa John's pizza box, all the textures and all the assets that we've needed to build this thing since 1996, 1997. And we keep using it as this running joke about, okay, we have pizza in here, we have virtual parties, but Wouldn't it be cool if everybody could just order the real deal from it too? And really get pizza and really do this or really get, products and services. And wouldn't it be great if this actually worked that way? What if I could click on my sneakers here and, and see Nike sneakers, on the online store and find this pair, or maybe, find other pairs like it or something. Wouldn't it be great if I can click on my sunglasses and see Ray-Ban, and say, you can have these Ray-Bans in here for free. And if you click on them, you can get a pair online. This is marketing. This is the future of it all. And it's probably going to cost them nothing to do it. Maybe pay a creator in here to do it, or find existing creators who've already done it under the table and say, hey, we got an idea here for you. We're going to officially say you have a good idea. We're going to officially say you can continue doing it, but we'd like you to expand on that. Get on the Hornbeak for whatever and say, okay, you guys got New Balance sneakers and Pegasus sneakers like I'm wearing, and have Nike come in there and say, I like that. We'd like you to expand on that and do the entire line. What's it going to cost Nike to do that? Nothing. But it's going to give them a lot of publicity.
Potentially. It'd be interesting to hear some of the counter arguments in terms of why a group like that would not feel that something like that would be in their best interest. I mean, obviously they wouldn't be necessarily as firmly under control of the content,
of course, as
maybe they would like to be.
And that's the part of the argument that these companies get really squeamish. Well, we can't control the entire message. No, you're never going to control the entire message. Even when you think you're controlling the message, you're really not anymore. You're really not stopping. Disney's really not stopping Disney porn. In reality, you can only control it favorably, or you can try to influence it. So instead of wasting lots of money, resources, and manpower trying to stop the negativity, just turn around and put your efforts towards the positive aspects of it and supporting the positive aspects of this remix culture, and it will drown out all the negative aspects at some point. I mean, if you put on a good example I put on the blog and also in the book chapter when I was writing it was, if there is, say, 300, at the time I wrote the chapter, it was like 380 something returns for Coca-Cola on Marketplace. And I know none of them were actually sanctioned by Coca-Cola. And I thought to myself, well, if Coca-Cola came in and said, look, we want to get rid of all these things, we want to do it in a way that's not going to be like a Hydra, how would they do it? Probably just find somebody that, pick somebody who actually knows what they're doing, give something better, and, beat them at their own game. Just say, there's no reason to buy all the inferior stuff or have any of the inferior stuff if there's an official Coca-Cola something that matches it.
Oh, hence then what you were referring to in your blog is in terms of finding the highest quality knockoff.
Right. And yes, right. It does sound like we're rewarding bad behavior, but if you look on the other side of the coin, we're rewarding damn good creators and imaginative designers and very qualified people. The best qualified people. And yes, they're going about it the wrong way. But when we look at it on the other side of the coin, what is the right way? It doesn't exist. There is no way for anybody to walk up to these companies and say, hey, I'd like to do this with you guys, and it'll cost you nothing. Nothing. I'll do it for free. You don't have to pay me. All I really want out of it is I just want to keep whatever revenue comes from it. And if you want to charge me part of that, I'll even split it with you. And it'll be advertising that pays you. And there's no avenue for that. They get this, brick wall.
Okay, so here's a question that I've got for you, because I mean, one of the, from the standpoint of the first entry into the marketplace, so you come into Second Life, and I realize Coke has already been in here, and they've basically said, yeah, no problem, everybody can knock off whatever they want. So I mean, it's, Coke's a bit of an interesting beast, but I mean, you get a group like Coca-Cola that comes in here and they say, we're going to work with the top 10% of all the knockoff people that are in here. Does that not, in effect, create a privileged group that eventually becomes, quote unquote, part of the machine? Like then as new people start to come in, is there not then a barrier to entry? I mean, if you didn't get in right away before that agreement was put in place.
I wouldn't say there's a barrier to entry. I would say that it wouldn't be like the way I outlined it when I was writing the blog entry was that it wasn't so much that once they do it, it's locked out to everybody. It would be the same type of agreement if it meets the approval of Coca-Cola. It would be as an option, not a requirement. So, like, say somebody made a Pac-Man machine or a Coca-Cola machine or some branded product in here, and and the branded company comes up and says, "Okay, we want this taken away. Is there IP infringement or whatever?" Well, there could be an option on the table that says, "Okay, look, let's look at this and say, is this actually a very high representation of your brand? If so, maybe it's in your best interest, instead of looking at it in a negative light, to control it in a positive light, which gives you a positive feedback loop." And we do that for every time that pops up. It's an option, but not a requirement. And if they say no, it's not high enough, or no, no, we don't want that extra option, then obviously we adhere to a DMCA request or a request to remove that from whatever system. But we do make it clear to these companies that you are facilitating a Hydra effect. You cut off a head and get 2 or 10 more back. And we'd like to stop that from happening, but it might require something innovative, some type of thinking that's outside your comfort zone. Something
right.
That's definitely different than what you're used to. And we know we're used to controlling the message. So we have to step away from that. And I know it's the scariest thing these companies have is they have these huge legal teams and marketing, and they say, okay, step away from that for a second. And they go, no, we can just sue them into the ground. But what is that going to do for you? It's not going to stop the other 64,000 people from making stuff if it's not there anymore.
Yeah, there's a really good example just recently in terms of the Franklin Lloyd Wright Center. And
yeah, that was a beautiful example right there. If I remember, they went through all the hurdles, the hoops. They had the agreement, and I think the Franklin Lloyd Wright Foundation just revoked it, and then a couple hours later, the lawyer sent the DMCA to them. And I'm like,
yeah,
that's the wrong way, the absolute opposite end of the spectrum, wrong way to do things. First, if I remember correctly, they're holding them responsible for third-party knockoffs, the cease and desist orders. Thank you, Jaden. Mm-hmm. They were holding them responsible for all the other third-party knockoffs that had nothing to do with them. It was bizarre. It was like Twilight Zone reading that, and I said, this is a perfect example of this old world kind of control the message thinking. They clearly don't get how things work. They don't get that, if somebody over here is making something and they're perfectly fine with it, you can't hold everybody else. You can't hold them responsible for what everybody else in the world's doing. In a real world or a virtual world. If they're not affiliated with you, then it wasn't your concern. But they clearly were. And it saddened me to no end. I went down there and took some pictures, and I was like, this is such a loss. And it's all because of
it was huge, because I tell you something. Some of the architecture. I mean, there are some really, really good architects in here, and they have been really good in terms of having different groups come in and recreate a lot of their works. And I'm quite sure that a number of them do see it as necessarily being a marketing or a branding opportunity. But then you've got the Frank Lloyd Wright Center, which came in, and I know one of the arguments that they had was that, the two big arguments that I remember hearing were, one, they didn't see the benefits that they were expecting to see after a year, which sort of blew my mind, because it was sort of like, okay, you guys just don't get what this environment is. But yeah, pretty much. The other one was that they were quote unquote spending too much money in terms of people's time coming in, monitoring, and making sure that their intellectual property was being protected, compared to the aforesaid profit, which did not exist. So it's sort of like,
it made no sense. One, getting rid of Frank Lloyd Wright Center did not alleviate the problem. It just made it worse, because you're dealing with the symptom and not the actual root.
Yeah. The
it bothered me.
Yeah, one of the interesting aspects. I know you haven't spent a lot of time with this, or at least maybe I haven't read enough of the blogs yet. Although I did try to get through a number of them.
It does go back like 6 years ago.
I noticed. I'm reading through it. I'm like, wow, you got
actually the reason I actually started that blog was as a requirement from one of my prior bosses when I worked at VR5 Online. As a CTO, my boss required me to keep a written history of what I was doing in virtual worlds and documenting any progress on any projects I was working on. So I started that blog as the City of Nidus, which is where the name came from.
Okay.
It came from that original project, which in turn was original project from somebody who actually now works on OS Grid programming. In Second Life, he works on different OS grids and programming. He goes by Guala. He was the original guy who started the Nidus project back in something like 1996 or 97. And when he left Active Worlds all those years ago, and he left the project to me, the Nidus project in Active Worlds, and came over to Second Life and got into it. And I touched base with him on and off over the years, and the Nidus project was actually a project run by him and sanctioned by Active Worlds as the company. And the whole point of what I remember was to just explore what could you push the environment to do. Come up with creative, innovative things and just push it to the limit. And he decided he had reached his limit and couldn't think of anything else, so he took off and went to Second Life. And a little while after he left, Active Worlds decided to close down that world because it was theirs, and I said, okay, no problem. And years later, when I worked at VR5 Online, my boss at the time wanted to do essentially the same thing, find out some sort of survey or discovery phase of what can we do with this kind of environment, push it. Push it to the maximum amount that we can do. And so we said, well, what's the name of this? And we said, you know what? This time around, I'm allowed to say it's Nidus. I'm going to bring it back, and we brought back the City of Nidus and just expanded it beyond anything that anybody had ever seen over a course of 4 or 5 years. And that's where that all started. And I just kept, after I had left VR5 Online and moved on to different projects, I just kept writing in the blog. I just kept going because I was still doing essentially the same thing, as in exploring different aspects of virtual environments and what kind of projects can you do, innovative things. Can you, what's missing? Can we do sound environments? Can we do binaural? I'm just pushing it in every direction. And I said, oh, I'll just keep writing about it and see see if anybody likes to read it.
Well, I know there's you've got another number of interesting concepts on your blog there, and I know as I was going through it, I was trying to tie a lot of these things together, and certainly with some of the things that I've been thinking of over the past several years, sort of leading into sort of why we developed Rockcliffe. But I mean, one of the areas that I noticed that you hadn't necessarily tried to tackle, and maybe I'm incorrect about this, is this idea of the nature of ownership and copyright. It's sort of separate from IP, and I'll explain where I'm sort of going with this. The nature of a marketplace is based upon a conceptual nature that things have value, and that there is scarcity of resources. We can go into the whole economics thing in terms of land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurial spirit, and all that other good stuff. But when you boil it right down, a lot of these things assumes that whenever we have something to barter, to exchange, whether we're using a pure barter system or whether we're using money the way we do today, that somebody has ownership or copyright over the things that are available. And more, one of the things that I'm noticing is that in virtual worlds, that's really not the case. Because essentially, once you put an idea out into the metaverse, that idea is there. You can't take it back. Right? And in a lot of ways, a lot of what you're talking about here is very much the same thing. Is you put a brand into the marketplace, you can't take that back. right? And people absorb it and they make it their own. But yet people still need to make a living, right? So as you have these small groups that come in here and they start trying to develop these knockoffs and what have you, do you see there being a longer term implication for the way in which the fundamentals of markets actually work with inside this structure, the sort of like the way things are going?
Well, from my experience, I would say that it's more suited towards an experiential or a services-driven type market more than a products type market. I mean, we can make chairs, we can make whatever we want if you're good enough. So it doesn't stop anybody from really going off and copying things or ideas. Ideas are just that. They have the shelf life. Ideas have the shelf life of a banana, which means that you can't make something and just kind of rest on your laurels. You keep innovating, and I think that's a key aspect. It used to be, I guess, in the music industry, you would make a couple of records, and you'd be good for 5 or 10 years. And you come back in 5 or 10 years and make a double album or something, or re-release your songs as greatest hits, and that doesn't fly anymore. You got to keep on working. You got to keep on doing what you did originally. You keep innovating, keep thinking of new products and ideas, and you take it as read that they have a shelf life. At some point, your brand or your items become ubiquitous. They become something that's desirable to everybody, and if they're not available, or if you're just making it uncomfortable for anybody to actually get a hold of it correctly, they're just going to have it, whether you like it or not. And we can spend a ton of time and resources trying to fight it, or we can try to work within the system. And the new system doesn't quite jive with what we do now. It doesn't jive with the idea of I can create a catalog and just rest on it for next year and now be done with it.
Right, but
how do we have to keep going?
Right,
and just assume that it has a shelf life, and assume that everything we do in a virtual environment, or whether it be the internet, or whether it be a virtual 3D system, or we just assume at some point that they all are not infallible and that they will fall to piracy. At some point, that's when the shelf life runs out.
Right. So how do you make an income from that? How do you pay the mortgage? How do you put food on the table?
Keep making new products. Just like any job. What you did a couple of weeks ago at your job has really no bearing on what you're doing today. It might be a completely new task. It's in the past, and you realize that the further away from the creation date, the less meaning it really does have. It becomes outdated, just like anything else. So we keep working, and we keep coming up with new ideas, and we keep innovating, but we don't just rest on our laurels. And that's what it boils down to, resting on laurels. Do we just build a bunch of stuff and say, okay, I'm going to collect income from this, indefinitely, or am I going to get back, am I going to take a month or two off and then actually come back at it and continue to make more because the stuff has a shelf life? It's like trying to say, why can't I make money off of this banana indefinitely? I know I pay my mortgage off of this bunch of fruit here, when I don't want to go out and pick more fruit. Get up off your butt and go pick more fruit, or go grow more plants, or go do something. Keep going, because it has a shelf life. Intellectual property does have a shelf life, whether we want to admit it or not. So at some point it becomes ubiquitous, or at some point it becomes so desirable or so influential that people will make knockoffs. And that's actually a good thing, I would believe. Yes, you lose control of that one item or that set of items, or your brand explodes into something that becomes ubiquitous. But then you can use that in a positive light, because you're making new things, and that and the positive things that came from the last round that had a shelf life contribute to the hype and the marketing and the feeling that people have around your brand going forward, and you keep doing it. It's a never-ending cycle. We can't just sit down and say, okay, everything's going to be there forever, and we should expect to hold on to it forever.
Right. So let me draw a line on a couple of different things that you've got here. And I realize that these 5 lessons of life are it's kind of interesting, and obviously there's more than just that. But I mean, one of the things that you had on there was this idea of giving where it counts, and to a certain extent, I mean, if we tie that back to the idea of developing high quality knockoffs, it essentially are we sort of going towards a model then where the large corporations, rather than treating new entrants and people that are creating these derivatives and these knockoff type works, rather than penalizing them for doing this, right, really should be encouraging them to try to develop, or as you say, to constantly innovate, working with their intellectual property within reason, right? In order to encourage, and maybe it's not necessarily a full-time income, but certainly, they're having some facility to make some income available without reprisal from the holder of the intellectual property in the first place. I mean, when we look at that in terms of building and supporting a culture, do you see that as sort of being one of the defining criteria of where it is that we need to get to?
Oh, absolutely. My thought on it is that there is a point where we need to understand when something will be more beneficial to let it go and roam out in the open and be remixed and without the fear of repercussion versus trying to fight the spread of it. And more often than not, in the digital age, it is more beneficial to let it go out within reason. We say I'm not going to say it's Wild West and do as you want, but there is within reason, and it should be very flexible. If a company sees this stuff, they should say, lay it out. Is it more beneficial? Is it going to benefit us in a better way to let it go? And say, okay, go ahead and see what you can do with this and innovate. Or is it going to be beneficial to try and squash it and spend millions of dollars and man hours and trying to fight this thing? And it's a very important and critical question to ask, because most companies don't ask that question. They usually just go for, let's go try to fight the Hydra. So the other option on the table becomes a balance on a scale. Is it going to come back as marketing? Is it going to create a positive vibe? Is it going to create a buzz in the community? Is it going to reflect positively on us for allowing this? And is there going to be a negative backlash if we try it the other way? So yes, yes, we can make money on these things, and yes, we can earn a living on it, but we have to work a little harder at it, or work a little smarter at it. I grew up with my parents always telling me, don't work harder because you'll just run yourself to the ground. Work smarter. Think of innovations. Think of, it doesn't matter if you have 20,000 items. It matters if you have, 100 items that are really good. And then you come up with another line later that's 100 items that are really good. It's quality over quantity. We don't need necessarily huge islands and stores and super malls filled chock to the end of stuff. We need some really good stuff.
We do, but I guess as a cautionary note then, and for the life of me, I wish I had thought about this before, because now that we've been talking about it, the examples come to mind, and I can't remember the name of the car manufacturer. But I think if you remember back, probably 4 or 5 years ago, and I can't remember if it was GM or if it was Ford, but one of them put out this request for people to create viral videos of a particular car model that they were very anxious to get out there, and they were hoping that this was going to
that was on
really...
YouTube. That was Ford, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
It's a Ford Fiesta, I believe it was.
Yeah, and it completely blew up in their face because they got all of these green commercials that were talking about how bad this vehicle was.
Right. So if you're going to do these things, you need to understand, this is a community, and this isn't a controlling message. You say, okay, you only do these things, and you say, you expect everybody to have nothing but glowing reviews about us, about how great we are, and you know what? As companies, we got to get our heads out of our asses. We need to realize that we aren't all of the above. We aren't as great as we try to make ourselves out to be, and we're not as great as our marketing department inflates our egos to be. We do make bad products. We do make really horrible decisions. And the public, when you ask them, are going to tell you when you really screwed up like that. They're going to be honest. They're going to be brutal at times because it's anonymous. People can be anonymous and they can just tell it as it is. And say, look, I've tried customer service and, I got screwed over so many times and blah, blah, blah. And that's why having a pulse on the community, you're never going to make everybody happy. But you should never expect everybody to be happy. You never expect everybody to give you, blow smoke up your butt all the time.
Hopefully not. But I mean, I guess to a certain extent, I sort of see this as being...
But there was a lot of good videos that did come out of that. I saw, I think Wheezy Waiter, somebody I subscribed to, great guy, YouTuber, did one. I think Dan Brown, Dan 3.0, he did one. They did, they gave him, I guess they gave him one to drive around for a week and make videos with. They did the same thing with Wheezy Waiter and everything, and they did awesome stuff. So out of all the pile of crap that they got out of it, they got shining diamonds, So it is always a balance, but you can't always expect the good to come out of it no matter what. You expect an avalanche of crap, in there. You just kind of shovel it and say, okay, this is crap, hey, this is good, let's keep that.
But is it really crap though, or is it a matter of some of these companies are so myopic in their views inside their corporate structures that there's no room for criticism from external sources that don't come through the...
I believe that's true as well. They're very myopic. They don't want to hear it. They think they can do no wrong, and the public is telling them, no, you're doing a lot of wrong, and this is where you're doing wrong. And they don't want to hear it, though. Just like a lot of these companies, there is no policy for people to submit and say, hey, I have this great idea in this virtual environment. It won't cost you a dime. They don't want to hear it. Unless it's from inside, and the only thing you get on the inside is, public ass kissers. Yes men and ass kissers. Yeah, this is a great car, even though it gets 5 miles to the gallon, it's awesome. Of course the public will love it.
So do you see this eventually leading towards opportunities for greater corporate responsibility? Or do you see them, or do you see corporations, even if they do start to walk down this path, continue to just treat it as a for lack of a better term, a slave labor force that so long as it's benefiting their bottom line, that's all they're interested in.
I think they'll go down either path. There's companies that will go down that path and treat it like just slave labor and whatnot, and those are the ones that are going to get burned the worst. I think a couple of years ago, maybe 2007 or 2008. Remember Creative, who makes Sound Blaster cards and X-Fi cards and everything. They made the X-Fi sound card or whatever, and the drivers for it were actually compatible with the older models, older cards. And what they did was they cut off all the HD audio and stuff for all the old cards on the driver update and refused to give everybody the ability to turn it back on. And he said, if you want that, HD audio, trash your card that's perfectly working and actually just needed the driver back that they took away. Then come and buy a $300, $400 X-Fi card from us, and the community was just livid about that. And somebody in the community was a programmer. They tore apart the driver and turned all that stuff back on for the old drivers and put it back on the forums. I said, here guys, it's not supported by them, but it works. The lawyers jumped on it. No, you can't do that, and blah, blah, blah. And it caused so much negative backlash that, that it really did, create one hell of I'm trying to say this without swearing, but it was a cluster, and the mainstream media picked up on it, and it turned into this huge firestorm, and Creative just got nailed to the wall over it. All because their lawyers, decided to threaten this kid who gave the community what they wanted. They came up with every reason in the book why they couldn't, why they wouldn't, or why they couldn't, and and this one kid came by and said, "Here, it's just that easy, and it works." And that was it. And it was such a firestorm around it, though, that creative learned a very valuable lesson that day, as in, don't piss off an entire community of people and don't jerk people around like that.
Especially not 15-year-olds.
Well, not 15-year-olds, but it was the entire community that jumped on about it because they had canceled the driver and was telling people essentially go buy a $300 card to make up for the fact that we took away your driver and we're not going to give it back. So we've crippled all your old cards, go buy another one. And that just drew everybody over the edge. So, yeah, companies are going to go down that path, time and again. They're going to keep doing that, but they're going to keep getting burned. Just like they're going to get burned with, intellectual property, and they're going to spend millions of dollars trying to prevent it, and it's not going to get anywhere. They can sue everybody on Earth, and the only thing it would do is make them bankrupt. Somebody's going to wake up the next morning after the fallout and say, I can go for a Coca-Cola right now. It's not going to stop anybody. And I said the same joke when I took down the Pac-Man machine and the other machines. I said it's not going to stop anybody. I said I guarantee in a week I'm going to see the same exact Pac-Man machine up there, and it's going to be the one that I originally was trying to replace with a better version to serve Namco when I filed the paperwork. And lo and behold, a week later I typed in Pac-Man and there's a couple pages now. I said it didn't do him any good. It just cut off the heads of a Hydra.
Yeah.
And it's going to keep doing that. And I said, well, clearly the IP policy here, or the IP situation just isn't working. It's just spending a lot of time getting a lot of nothing done. So there's got to be a better way. And unfortunately, that better way means we've got to step out of our comfortable little spot and start thinking, be a little squeamish about it and say, okay, I know we can't control everything, but let's test, let's try, let's do trial and error, let's try to innovate this.
Right. We've only got a couple of minutes left here, and then we have to sign off. But I'd like to get a couple of last words from you in terms of this idea of the future of experience, and where you sort of see a lot of the politics of intellectual property and what have you heading over the next 5, 6, 7 years.
Politics of intellectual property and experience. I think,
well, how this is all going to play out.
It's going to get ugly. I can say that. It's going to continue to get ugly, but in the end, I think the people overall are going to win. The consumer and prosumer are going to be the winners. There's just too many people in the world to have a company trying to fight everybody. And when you create a brand that's just transcends your company, you can't blame the people for wanting it anymore. You've done your job. You've done your marketing job. The whole point of marketing was to get people to want it in their lives and have it within their lives at all times. So why are you blaming the people for behaving exactly the way that you wanted all along? You've done your job. Congratulations. But don't punish people for it now. Work with it. Go with the flow. And I think the experience is going to be that we're going to see more prosumers than consumers. We're going to see less controlling of the message and more just out in the open. You're going to see more control by the people, overall. We're going to see, yes, there's going to be negative and positive about it. That's just like anything. It's just life. We can't control the message, so we can try to sort it out and try to work with what we've got. I think that's the future. But the whole controlling the message is, it's been going for the past 10 years. As much as we want to try, it's just not going to happen. Excellent.
Okay. Well, listen, thank you very much for coming on to Inside the Avatar Studio with me today. I mean, it's been a pleasure talking to you. I mean, this is, like I said, I've got a couple of blog posts myself that are sort of in this line, so I'm very interested in this subject. And, I'm hoping that we can get you back here again, later and continue and see where this sort of goes on to, because I think it's going to be one of the topics that really has to be addressed over the next 5 to 10 years in order for a lot of this stuff, this virtual stuff, to really move forward appropriately. So, as I said, thank you very much for coming onto the show. And
thank you.
Thank you. I just want to, before we sign off here, I just want to send out a thank you to Bevan Whitfield for producing today's show. Give a thank you to Sloan Skellerup for doing a little bit of the twittering and the blasting out today, and Mel Burns and Robustus Hacks from Metaverse Television for helping us put this onto the air. So thank you all very much. If you get a chance, you can catch us on Facebook. Look up Rockcliffe University Consortium, or on Twitter, URockcliffe. So thank you very much, and we'll be signing off.